Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. I have with me someone really, really special, Mr. Claude Arpi, who's considered a absolute authority as far as Tibet is concerned, and of course, my favorite China is concerned, and the CCP is sitting there. So I want to ask him something. He's written an article recently in the first post, which actually caught my attention, and I quoted his article as well as a couple of days ago when I discussed China as a very interesting thing that we need to start countering. The article was called "China is preparing for history warfare that India must counter." Guys, I'd really recommend you go to his blog. It's cloudarpblogs.com, and I will actually put a link to that in the description so that you guys can actually go there and check it out because there is a lot of it's cloudarp.net. I'm sorry. uh, I'll put the link there in the description so that you guys can check it out. He writes quite a bit and a lot of stuff that he's written in history as well. Very interesting to read. Sir, namaskar, welcome to the show, and I hope
But
to actually learn from you about this whole concept of history warfare. You seem to be very familiar with it. It's a new term for a lot of us in India. So tell us about it, sir, right to begin with.
I don't think it's a new term, but I just coined it like that. And I can't pretend to be an expert in archaeology and history. But I think it's something interesting. You see, after the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, there's two Chinese from the People Liberation Army, senior colonel, they wrote that very unrestricted warfare, a book which became very famous in the West, and everyone started reading it and thinking, what is unrestricted warfare? So they quote so many type of different warfare than the usual the classical warfare with infantry, or even now with more gadget, or even air force, and but different new type of warfare. But China has been adept to what I call history warfare. It means that they, by studying the history from their point of view, and some very often inventing history from their point of view, they can prove that some areas have been always theirs. So it is the case of Tibet, it is the case of Xinjiang, which was earlier Eastern Turkestan, and now it's more and more the case we'll see in Ladakh, where they're pushing and what is called the LAC. But historically, if you go to any historical record, there's no Chinese around the Pangong Lake. And not a single Chinese in 2,000 years has come around the Pangong Lake. Now, there was the Tibetan one side and the Ladakhi the other side. On the north of the Aksashin, there was the Ugyur of the eastern Turkestan. But in the record, there's no Chinese. No. The Chinese empire was restricted within the Great Wall of China. But since China has become more powerful, they have been extending, and it's the first thing that Mao Zedong did in October 1st of 1949. He declared the People's Republic, and 1 month later, he started marching in Eastern Turkestan, annexed that area, and suddenly India had a new neighbor. So, but they had to justify their annexation or invasion, you call it whatever you want. So they want to justify it in digging records. So from our side in India, we have been very slow. Declassification is, in putting it very mildly, is very slow. More than mildly, it's slow, or it doesn't exist. Today, we still don't have the Anderson-Brooks report of 1962. So similarly, for so many issues regarding Tibet or Xinjiang, or the relation with India's northern border with the northern neighbor. Northern neighbor was Tibet. Northern neighbor was Eastern Turkestan, no China. I'm very happy that today still the chief minister of Arunachal, Mr. Pema Khandu, always says, I have no border with China. I have a border with Tibet. But China, slowly over the years, and it started in the early 20th centuries, before the Shimla Convention in 1913, 1914, they changing the historical fact and start claiming areas like the entire, what is today Arunachal Pradesh, was earlier Nifa, and trying to prove. From our side, we have not done much to counter it. But now we see that it's becoming more serious in the sense that they have start doing archaeology on a very large scale. Last 3 4 years, there was hundreds of articles in their media, the Chinese media in Tibet, particularly, about the excavation done on the Tibetan plateau as well in Xinjiang. So, and you see the end result, the outcome is that these areas have belonged to China since immemorial time, which is absolutely not true. But at least for our borders, we have to counter it and say, Ladakh, there was no Chinese around, but we have to do some homework, and it's what that was the object of my article.
Sir, one thing that you have actually brought out in this conversation is that they, and you said this very rightly in the beginning, and I had a big smile on my face, that they build up history as they go along, and they're famous for cartographic warfare. As a matter of fact, it is well known that they keep claiming 1959 line, this line, that line. They've never officially given us their demand, right? They've never
They,
given us a particular map that says, okay,
in
this is the line.
They have done so for the central sector in 2000, year 2000, and in 2002, they have shown for 20 minutes their so-called perception of the border in western sector, means in Ladakh. And after 20 minutes, they withdrew the map. They saw there was too much difference of perception in many of these areas. 2 3 days ago, there was some video which went viral about in Ladakh. Some nomads, some Drokpa in Ladakh went to raise for grazing. They went in some area, and China says it's mine, and they send their people. But if you look at the historical records of this area, which is near a place called Dongti, when the river, the Indus River, is taking a bend towards the west, this there was never been Chinese, and there have never been Tibetan. In fact, I've done quite a lot of study in the National Archive and elsewhere on the history of the different disputed place between Ladakh and Tibet. And there's mainly one area which is called Dokpo Karpo, which is north of the Pangong Lake. So this area where the dispute took place 2 3 days back, and which was recorded and which became viral, there was no dispute. It was a Ladakhi place. So now China is sending some People's Liberation Army, some Javan, to claim this area. So my point has always been since years that we have to do more research in history, and just to show to them, say no. And if you show to them the proof, sometime they will
Back
drop it
off
for some time.
for
So
some time.
I will tell you a small story. That
Yes, sir.
one time there was a discussion, a negotiation between Bhutan and China for their own border. And the Chinese delegates, representative, start saying that many places belong to us. And he used as an argument, he said, La in Chinese means pass, which is not true. It's in Tibetan. You have Natula, all the passes are called La, means pass in Tibetan, not in Chinese. So he was going on and going on, and suddenly the very sharp Bhutanese representative told the Chinese, what about Ambala? and, and the Chinese couldn't say anything. So my point is, sometimes we have to counter them either on the lighter mode like this one, or also by giving historical fact. When there was in 1960 the extensive negotiation for several months between the official of both of China and India, India had so much documents showing that all this area, whether in Ladakh or in Nifa at that time, what is Arunachal today, it was belonged to India. Either it was south of the watershed, either it has been grazed for centuries by Indian grazers or local tribes, Indian local tribes in Arunachal, or Lataki nomads in Ladakh, and all the proof were on India's side, and China had, of course, no proof because they've not been there. So actually, that was one of the issue that tilted the government at that time not to be very, very rigid. And maybe people say that at that time in 1960 there was a chance of finding a middle path or reconciliation. I don't know about that, but the fact that India had so much proof and China had no proof, it was really it has a recorded fact, which is
So
been published.
let's talk about Tibet a little bit. You mentioned in your this thing that they did an archaeological survey, and they've said that, oh, that for thousands of years Tibet has been a part of China and this and that. Uh, I'd like you to comment on that. And the second part, as we were talking offline as well, the sheer factor that they have to change the name of Tibet means that they are not fully in control. That's how I interpret it. How do you, sir?
I think that archaeological side, uh, they have extensively excavated, something which has not happened in the past because of the belief of the Tibetan were not keen at all to do excavation. And even in Ladakh side, on the Indian side, the excavation have been very superficial. They restrict themselves to petroglyphs or to structure which are above the level, not by digging, because local people don't like this digging. China has not this problem. They don't ask what the local people feel or believe. They just do it. So they have found extensive civilization which is below and pre-Buddhist, in particularly in Western Tibet, that area which they call Nari, and which is very close culturally from Ladakh, from Kinor, from Spiti. And they have shown uh, very old civilization, which is called the Changchun Empire. Now, there is no proper map. There's some scholars have done maps, but it's right now it has not been everything confirmed. But my point in that article that this Changchun kingdom, this all this area, whether it's today in Tibet or in Himalayan region of in India, uh, had extensive relation connection with the south, and in particularly with the Indus Valley civilization. Is what I quoted some research recently made, and some people said more should be done. Actually,
Hmm.
hardly anything has been done in that domain. It's very important to show the linkage between the Indus Valley civilization, Dauravira, Lothal, Harappa, all these sites which have been discovered in the 20th century, and the old Tibetan, pre-Buddhist Tibetan civilization. Because there's no doubt that all exchange, or I would say the culture, the language, everything has come from the south. It includes much later Tibetan Buddhism, which comes from the Nalanda tradition in the 7th century. And the language, the script has come from India, not from China.
Yeah.
And so this has to be documented by way of doing excavating or doing working on different mode of showing the past. Today we have image satellite imagery. You can show that there was a river Sarasvati which is still existing and which went dry and like that. So similarly, I think more research that very few scholars have thought of or even have started doing this type of research. That was the object of my article, and in particularly the ASI, who is usually just restricting itself to dig 10, 11, 12th century, but not much deeper than that. So this should change, and because we should show that for thousands of years there was very deep cultural, trading exchange, religious exchange between India or the subcontinent and the plateau. And that is wrong. That is not historically correct to say that the relation was only with China and the mainland. There was no, like in 1950 when Chinese came in Western Tibet. They never seen a Chinese before. That is no doubt about it. For thousands of years. So this should be also documented scientifically. And with all new, for example, I remember someone doing a study on the pollens on the Pangong Lake, and you can prove the climate changes which correspond to the climate change during for the Indus Valley civilization, which show the drying of the Sarasvati River. So all this, I'm not an expert. I'm not going to do it, but I'm just have put it on the table, hoping that someone, and in particular the ASI, will do something. You had a second question, I think, about changing the names.
Yeah, why would they do that at this time after 70, 75, 80 years of them doing this? The the Dalai Lama question is still open. Of course, he's I hope he has good health for a long time to come, but the reality is inevitable. Uh, why are they doing it now? And does that tell you that they're not fully in control inside Tibet, sir?
I think they are doing it now, as you said, because they have not full control. They have control over the people life, but they don't have control over the people mind and the people heart. So that's different thing. This they can always control. If someone goes from one place, from Chigatse to Lhasa, from Lhasa to Ningchi, move or Gamse, move around. But to have a control over the mind and the heart of the people is much more difficult. They always call Tibet Xishang, but it's in their language. But now what is new, that they have changed name in English. The English translation, every Chinese website compulsorily has to use Xishang, is replacing Tibet. So that's a new thing, and it's being done very systematically. And as a matter of fact, they've sent the party secretary, Wang Zhongchen, the party secretary in Lhasa of the Tibet Autonomous Region that they call Xishang Autonomous Region. They sent him to Nepal, to Sri Lanka, and to Singapore to try to sell the Xishang to the neighboring country. In Nepal, he was extremely well received by the president, by the prime minister, by the leader of the opposition, by the speaker of the assembly. And in Sri Lanka, he was received by the foreign minister of Sri Lanka. And they're trying at least to India's neighborhood to sell that Xishang. I don't know if it will work or not, but you rightly say that it is not a sign of strength, it's a sign of weakness, and that they can't control Tibet by other ways, by bringing development. You have to admit that they have developed Tibet like it has never been done before, in terms of infrastructure, of schools, of many things. Even if the schools are just taught in Chinese and not in Tibetan, that is another thing. But they have done their work on education, on infrastructure. infrastructure is always dual use. Dual use means for the civilian purpose as well as for the People's Liberation Army. But developing is not the end. They have not conquered the heart of the Tibetan. That is, I'm speaking inside Tibet. I'm not speaking about Dharamsala or the Tibetan in the West, but inside Tibet, I think they are not. They didn't convince them that their system was better, and you can see it when they show their own Panchem Lama. You know, in '89, the previous Panchem Lama, the 10th Panchem Lama, passed away, and a few 3-4 years after, the Dalai Lama recognized one boy as a real Panchem Lama born in Tibet, and immediately that boy was arrested. That was in '95, so it is nearly 30 years that that boy is in jail. He was jailed at the age of 5 or 6, and they impose their own Panchem Lama. But when this Panchem Lama moves around in Tibet, there's hardly 30, 40, 50 people which are brought just to koto in front of him or so-called get his blessings. But there's no large crowds. Like if the Dalai Lama goes anywhere in the North India, if you see when he arrived in Leh or more
My
recently
God.
Sikkim, the entire stadium was filled up with people spontaneously. It's not people paid and brought by bus to just show. So you see that this they have not conquered this
Hmm.
mind of the Tibetan. And changing the name, they can change the name. They've done. I have a dictionary maybe with 40 names of villages. All the names have been changed. So I have the Chinese name, the Pinyin name, the Tibetan name, and the English name of this thing. So it brings confusion, basically, this
Yeah.
changing of. It will bring confusion in the Nepali or like that, or people who want to be confused, they will be confused. And like if you take, we come back to Ladakh, to the nearby where there was a confrontation last week, Demchok, they changed the name, they call Parigas. Nobody
Parigas.
knows why it's called Parigas. And they start claiming this area, which has been Ladakhi for ages. So all the caravan going to Lhasa knew that they crossed the Nala near Demchok. They were in Tibet. They were reached that first village of Tashigang. So, but by changing the name, they bring a lot of confusion and they show that it is their place. I mean, the British did it in a smaller way in India. So India now, Madras has become Chennai again, and Bombay has become Mumbai, or Calcutta, Kolkata. So it has been undone, but it was done on a much milder scale than the Chinese. When they do something, they do it more systematically.
Yeah, I mean, these names were there before in history, so it's not something that is new. They just brought back the old names. I don't think Tibet was known by Xi Jinping and Xi Jinping Xi and Katse. I just do it as a joke. Everything has to in Xi Jinping China. Everything has to start with an X. Otherwise, it's not valid. So, lastly, I'll take. I'd like to ask you another question. Is in your article you also mentioned about Ladakh and a study that was done there to kind of bring about the archaeological this thing there. One is that aspect I'd like you to comment, and the second part is about Arunachal. Can we not do the same thing there? Because we know the connections, our home kingdom, and we know the history of that area. That is, I mean, it's India. There's just no way about it. So, how do you think India should kind of prepare itself for something like this?
I don't want to say anything on ASI, but it's a bureaucratic organization. It's a government organization, and sometimes it needs more guidance. Let's say that more private enterprise or like that. So I think the guidance has to come from the government, from the MOD or MEA, saying that you have to show that this existed, this old linkage, first with this mountain area with the subcontinent including the Indus Valley civilization, and as well as Central Asia. Now you have a big problem in Ladakh because you have to jump over Gilgit-Baltistan, which is today occupied by Pakistan, or you have to jump over Xinjiang to reach Central Asia, which is occupied by China. So it cuts the lineage, and there is no way of collaborating with the Chinese on that. But maybe to start with, you go to Central Asia and show all the trade routes and the connection and things like that. Um, India has decent diplomatic relation with Central Asian Republic. Uh, Similarly, for the subcontinent, you can't go to Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, which is today Pakistan, but there's many sites in Rajasthan or Gujarat which you could find a
Yeah.
linkage if you find the same objects in this. For that, digging will have to be done. Local people will have to be explained that this is in their interest also, that this their past history is also proved scientifically, because they had the reluctance to dig below the surface. So there's many other things which could be done, but I think some study would have to be come from the government to have a committee to see what can be done in terms also satellite imagery and all different scientific um, component of modern archaeology, because modern archaeology is one aspect is excavation, but there's so many other aspects which can be brought into the picture to really get. And but unfortunately, also or fortunately, it's I mean it's a good thing that it has been dug below the mosque and found temples, but it should not be restricted to that. It's a good thing. I'm totally in favor, and I'm very happy that Ayodhya has taken place, but uh, it should not be restricted to that. It should also go beyond and see for the future of this Himalayan belt.
Other places.
If you
Mm.
take the Tibetan medicine, Swarekpa, now this system of medicine has been included in Ayush. There's a Ministry of Ayush, means Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, Yoga, and one more that I forgot. So that Swarekpa, the Tibetan system of medicine, has been included. The Tibetan system of medicine come largely, maybe 60, 70%, 75% from the Ayurveda, from the text, the tantric text of the Ayurveda. It's called the Four Tantras in the Tibetan system of medicine. It
Mm.
has been translated. The Tibetan system of medicine has also taken input from the Chinese medicine, like Moksha Bhikshan, or from the Persian system, some say even from the Greek or from Central Asia. So altogether, it has done a very unique, but the main route is still connected with subcontinent through the Ayurveda. So all this should be also taken in consideration and highlighted. One way it's highlighted because the government has recognized in Ladakh they call Amchi system, but it's the same system. It's Tibetan medicine. The original name in Tibetan is Swarekpa. Amchi system, it's the same. Now it's recognized officially by the Tibetan government. So these sort of things are very important to show the linkage and to support it and to really promote this.
Yeah,
This.
yeah, absolutely correct, sir. There's just no question about it. I think what you've kind of mentioned and told us is very, very critical, because the Chinese are pretty good at doing all these underhanded things to kind of take away your claims. And history is, at the end of it, going to be our best friend if we need to fight this particular thing. Because on the battlefield, they won't come, and they'll keep doing these little tricks around the place to keep troubling you. Thank you so much, sir, for making us aware
I
of.
just want to add that the government also should declassify. Of course, if
Yes.
something has to be kept classified, I understand fully. But 90, I can tell you for having studied for 20 years or more in the archives, 90.9% of the historical document can be declassified. And by declassifying, you help the people, you help to have a better knowledge of history. History is in favor of India, not in favor of China, at least for the Himalayan belt. So it should be done on the very very large scale, and let it be open. If there's few pages which should remain classified after 50 years, I don't think many, but let them keep them classified, but all the rest can be declassified and open to public to or open to scholar to study.
Absolutely, sir. I don't think anybody can have a problem with that. Thank you so much, sir, for taking all the time. Always a pleasure talking to you. And I hope to see you back faster than the last break that we've had. Till then, sir, Jai Hind, Namaskar.
Namaskar.